All right, everyone, we're going to start to make our story quilts now. Here are the supplies that you're going to need. You're going to need one piece of white construction paper and a pencil and some coloring supplies. You might also want to use scissors, glue, and some scrap papers, but that will be optional, okay? So the first step is we are going to draw some lines on our white piece of paper. Make sure your paper is going vertical, that means tall. We're going to measure out where the story for our quilt is going to go. Just like Faith Ringgold, we're going to put the story in the middle and then some quilt designs around the outside. So from your art bag, you should have some scrap pieces of paper that look like this, some rectangles. What I would like you to do is just take one of your rectangles and fold it in half like a book. So my paper is going long, horizontal. Fold it in half like a book. Make sure the corners meet each other. Now we're just using this piece of paper to trace and measure. You can put this back in your art bag when you're done. I want you to try and find the middle of your white paper and use your pencil to trace this piece of paper. We're using this as a tracer so that we can put our story right in the middle of our quilt. Take your pencil and go right up against the edge of that piece of paper. Nice and slow, so make sure you get all four sides and the corners. Okay, perfect. So I can put this back in my art bag. So this is where my story is going to go for my quilt. Now, your step now is to draw your story in the middle right here. I'm just going to write story so that you know. I'm not going to actually draw my story. You are going to draw a story from your life, something that you will always remember, that you'll never forget, and something that is special to you. Use your pencil, and you can use any kind of coloring supplies that you'd like to draw and color your story. So that is your first step today. Go ahead and do that and pause the video and then come back when you're done. Okay, now that you finished your story, now the outside of your art is going to be your quilt designs. Using our pencil again, we're going to do a little bit of measuring and drawing of some lines to break up this big space that frames our story. So you can use that scrap paper again, and you can use the edge of it to make straight lines, or in your art bag, I've also given you a little piece of thick paper, and you can also use this as like a tool to help you make straight lines. So for example, if I put my pencil up against it, it can help me make super straight, nice and precise lines. Or if you have a ruler, you can use that as well. Okay, so from this rectangle in the middle, I'm going to make 4 lines from the corners. Now watch how I do this. I'm going to go straight up from this corner all the way to the edge of my paper. And the same thing for this side, go to the right corner, all the way up. And then we're going to go to the bottom corners and the same thing, make a straight line down and a straight line down this time. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go from left to right. So go to each corner and put your tool up against that corner and go left to right and make some straight lines now. Next corner. And then the top 2 corners. Perfect. Okay, so what we just did, friends, is we made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different spaces that we can put different types of patterns for our quilt. If you wanted, you could even break up the big spaces to make them a little bit smaller. That's up to you. Okay, so now I am going to draw some quilt patterns. I can use my pencil, my coloring supplies. You can use markers, crayons, colored pencils, or even your oil pastels. And I'm going to think of some designs that I could draw using only geometric shapes for the outside. On your project assignment on Google Classroom, you will see this design inspiration page. There are tons of different quilt designs using only geometric shapes that you can look at and get some ideas from. Or you can make up your own. So I think I'll start with this because this is an easy way to help me get some ideas going. I think I am going to just start with, I think I'll try and draw this pattern right here. It looks kind of like a star. So I'm gonna pick one of my sections here, maybe more of a smaller section I'll start with. So I'm gonna start with this bottom one here. I can use my pencil to sketch this out first, or I can just use my markers. I think I'll use my pencil. So it looks like I need to start with a square in the middle. And then from that square, there's some triangles on the outside. So I'm just using my eyes to look at the pattern and try my best to copy it. And then on the outside of these triangles, there's some yellow triangles that go like this. All right, that looks pretty good. And then on the outside here, this is just one color purple. So I can take my coloring supplies now if I think it looks pretty good, and I can start to color this. I don't have to use the same colors in the picture. I can change up my colors. That's up to you. And then I'll just simply color in this quilt design. Notice how I only used triangles and squares. I only used geometric shapes. Your goal is to only use geometric shapes in your quilt designs on the outside. On the inside, when you draw your story, you can use any shapes that you like. Okay, I'll finish this pattern by just coloring in the outside. Now, one thing to keep in mind, friends, is color your entire pattern all the way to the edges, even the space around the shapes. Make sure your quilt has tons of color and you don't leave any big white sections empty and blank. So I'm using my markers because I like coloring big patterns with markers. I don't like using oil pastels, but you can use whatever you like. All right, I've done one pattern, that looks great. Now I can go and draw a new pattern. Maybe I'll come up with one from my brain and not from this page. I think right here, I'm gonna draw a flower using only geometric shapes. And if you remember from your practice from last week, you also did this. So I'm gonna try and sketch a flower, but my challenge is I cannot use any curvy shapes. I have to use only geometric shapes. So I'm gonna use a square and then some other polygons. And a rectangle for the stem, a triangle for the leaf and another leaf, a big rectangle on the bottom for the grass, and maybe I'll put kind of like a funny geometric cloud made up of squares. Maybe I'll put a sun in the sky as a square. That looks great. It looks like a whole little landscape. So now I can color my design. I followed all the rules. I only used geometric shapes. I didn't use any organic shapes, any random shapes. They all are squares, rectangles, triangles, or other polygons. This is awesome. So I'm not going to color the whole flower. I'm just going to give you an idea of how I'm going to color the flower. I'll color the stems. The grass down here will be green. My sky all around here will be blue, and I'll finish that later. Okay, I want to show you one more technique. So you can draw and color all your patterns if you'd like, or you could use scissors, glue, and scrap papers. If you really like cutting, you can try cutting out some designs to put on the outside using geometric shapes. You can look at the design inspiration for some ideas, or you can just cut out your own shapes. I've got some shapes here that I've already cut out of my colored construction paper from my art bag, and I can use these geometric shapes that I've cut out to try and arrange them to make a pattern. This is a pattern that I kind of saw on the design inspiration. It started like this, but then I wanted to add my own creative details to it, so I added these orange triangles. And I'm gonna make kind of like an opposite triangle pattern. Right side up, upside down, big and small. And I can add more triangles up here, and then I can use my glue to glue them down. I could also put a big piece of paper for the background. Like maybe I want to measure a piece of paper here and put a purple background down before I glue my shapes down so there's not a lot of white space. That would be a great idea. Oh, my glue stick is not coming undone. Does anyone else have this problem sometimes? Oh, I might need to get a new glue stick. Okay, I'll just show you in the video. I would put this down and glue it down. And then I would put my triangles down and glue them down. And look how much nicer that looks. I like how the background is purple and not white. It gives it a lot more color in my quilt. And I did have to measure this a little bit to see how big I needed my purple rectangle to be. Okay, I think you get the idea, friends. So I'm going to finish this pattern and glue it down. And then look at how many more I have to do. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more patterns to do. So your goal today is to finish your story and try and finish 3 or 4 patterns, not all of them. Next week, you'll finish the rest of the patterns, and then your quilt will be complete. All right, friends, good luck. I can't wait to see what you create.